moving on to our next conversation here, we're talking about Joe Manchin, another one of Ryan's favorite politicians.
Love Joe Manchin.
All right, Ryan, what happened with Joe Manchin this week?
So he was in New Hampshire, which may or may not have a primary, but it's still kind of symbolic in our minds of the launching of the presidential campaign season. So anytime you go to New Hampshire, you're sending the signal, hey, talk about me as a presidential candidate, especially if you're going with a dark money organization that has raised $70 million and says that's going to have ballot access in all 50 states, not the Green Party, talking about no labels, which is basically private equity, hedge fund, and other moguls putting together money behind this organization to say that, can we just get people like Joe Manchin and John Huntsman,
common sense,
Lisa Murkowski, if she'll join us, to just common sense solutions that involve a lot of cutting taxes and cutting regulations.
Let's get some adults in the room. Right?
Yeah, basically like, 90s era Republicanism.
Or Democratism. Clinton of the...
They just want to go back to the 90s.
They just want to...
90s nostalgia.
Yeah, they want low taxes, basically.
Right, and so we put up A1 here. So Joe Manchin up at this no labels event where they are very kind of not subtly recruiting him to be their independent candidate, and he continues to tease it. Dick Durbin the other day called Joe Manchin history's greatest political tease. Accurate, no lies detected in that description. And so he sat down with these moguls to talk about how common sense solutions are needed, and maybe he'll be the one to provide it. I think people have to understand that the context for this is that you don't want to make any 100% predictions, but he's close to a dead man walking in West Virginia in his re-election race in 2024.
Yeah.
Jim Justice has announced he's going to run against him. His former Democrat, former friend, who's now a Republican and not a friend. And the partisan structures that he's running up against in West Virginia are, to me, just so insurmountable that even somebody who is an adept politician like he is in West Virginia and well-liked, you go around West Virginia, everybody likes Joe Manchin.
Yep.
And the left has to acknowledge that. Like he's good at the kind of the retail politics of it, and in a small state where you get to meet most of these people over a long career. He was governor, secretary of state, state senator. His family's been involved in West Virginia politics for 3 generations. But it's just such a Republican state at this point that you've got too many voters who are just willing to say, I like Joe Manchin, but I'm a Republican. And I also like Jim Justice, too. And so... Well,
hence Jim Justice becoming a Republican.
Right, yeah, exactly. And Manchin, in fact, Manchin helped trigger this. I think in 1994, Manchin was behind the Democrats for the Republican governor movement, which really kind of busted the dam in West Virginia and helped create the Republican Party that is now going to eat him alive.
If Manchin ran as a Republican and say Jim Justice hadn't gotten into the primary, so it was Manchin and Alex Mooney, if he had switched parties, he would win easily, just with the R.
Ish, maybe. The problem is, and I say this as somebody who's glad that he came back to the IRA and helped pass the biggest climate spending package in world history. But I think that his support for the American Rescue Plan, he was a pretty reliable, if annoying, Democratic vote throughout 2021 and 2022.
Absolutely, yes.
And I think that really did actually cost him back home. I'm not going to write a Profile and Courage book about Manchin, but compared to what West Virginia would be expected to produce, which is like a Shelley Moore Capito who's going to vote for 0 Democratic priorities. Manchin was a godsend for Democrats in 2021 and 22, and I think he's going to, and I think he'll pay the price for that. Now, like I said, he was extraordinarily annoying all the way through and cut what could have been a seriously ambitious agenda down to a much smaller one, but still big enough that it's causing him a lot of problems. And so that leaves him with maybe this escape hatch of a vanity presidential run, and then a deal where, because he's a deal maker at heart, a deal where at some point he drops out for some type of concessions for who knows what.
Yeah, there's something really powerful about being able to say, I was at the table when we were debating the American Rescue Act or the IRA, whatever it is, and saying, listen, they pushed me to do X, Y, and Z. And I just could see him. I don't think he actually ever will become a Republican, so I feel like he has this sort of emotional attachment to the Democratic Party, and he did vote. I mean, he voted in that direction, not in a Shelley Moore Capito way, because I think he is, sort of an old school Democrat, maybe not in the way that modern Democrats like or would define that now, but he really, I don't know. I feel like if he did decide to become a Republican, a la Jim Justice, he would be a kind of an unstoppable force in West Virginia. But that's pure speculation. Your point is very well taken. Let's actually just roll this clip so people can see him seated next to a well-coiffed John Huntsman and a reporter up in New Hampshire. Take a look at this video.
I think people are getting ahead of putting the cart ahead of the horse. We're here to make sure that the American people have an option. And the option is, can you move the political parties off their respective sides? They've gone too far right and too far left. If that movement can move, but that can't be done unless they're threatened. The only way you can threaten is have people out there that says, listen, they can't win. Either side can't win without the independent. Without that independent, that means center left, center right, an independent Republican, an independent Democrat. If they have another option, then they're in trouble. Both parties are in trouble. So they're going to have to say, okay, we better look at this again. I don't think unless we stay over here that they're going to vote for us. So maybe we can move. Let's see what happens. It's too early. Everyone thinks we need to do something.
But I'm pressing on this because if you do get in the race and you spoil the election, would that factor into?
I've never been in any race I've ever spoiled. I've been in races to win, and if I get in a race, I'm going to win. So, with that being said.
Oh, he was ready for that one. He also told Caitlin Collins that he says, I haven't made any decision, nor will I make a decision until the end of the year. And this goes along with C3. If you were wondering, when are they going to talk about Gavin Newsom, the most formidable man in the Democratic primary, potentially? Here you have Democratic strategist Doug Schoen saying in an Orange County Register op-ed that Gavin Newsom wants to run for president. This wasn't sort of a spilling of any tea. It was more just reading the tea leaves, looking at what's out there and saying, this is a guy. And I'm sure Doug Schoen knows a little bit of inside stuff, too. And I think it's probably pretty clear. Writing is on the wall for a lot of people that Gavin Newsom wants to run. So I think the question when you look at both those stories side by side, two very powerful Democrats in their own states, seems to me almost that they're running out the clock and that there's an idea of whether Joe Biden, something happens to Joe Biden, that they are positioned in case something goes wrong medically for Joe Biden, in case there's a surprise decision one day that he doesn't run because of his age, because of his health. And now they're in a position where they can jump in. And I think Manchin may be using the third-party excuse to do that. Or should we be taking the Manchin third-party spoiler threat very seriously?
I don't think so, because I think, like I was saying earlier, he's such a deal maker that you could buy him out of that for whatever kind of concession he wants. If it looks like he's going to get 7 or 8% or something like that and throw the election to Trump. But I think you're right about the analysis of the status quo, because right now, the kind of no labels argument and the Manchin argument pretends that Joe Biden doesn't exist. Like, it pretends that Bernie Sanders won the presidential campaign. It's like the parties are in control by the far left and the far right. It's like, I'm pretty sure that Joe Biden is president right now. And Joe Biden is not the far left. He's just the definition of a boring centrist. Like, that's who Joe Biden is.
Although he's governed a little differently.
He has. I'm glad that he has kind of been dragged a little bit to the left, but he's still Joe Biden, and he still always codes as a centrist.
Yes.
Either way.
To voters.
To voters. Yeah. And so the idea that somebody's going to look at Joe Biden and Joe Manchin and see much daylight between the two of them is a fantasy. They also do this thing that he did in that clip where they say, 60% of the country is independents.
Yes.
Like, okay, yeah, that's true. Half those are registered as independents, but are always partisan voters with either Democrats or Republicans. Like, another 40% of those are to the left of the Democrats or to the right of the Republicans. So they're not like centrists sitting around waiting for Huntsman and Manchin to team up. You're left with like maybe 10% of those independents who are remotely gettable. And those people don't want to vote for a spoiler in general. or they'd probably just rather sit it out than vote for a spoiler.
Right.
And so you'd have to have like some health scare, and then maybe Kamala is like the Democratic nominee or something, and then maybe there's some type of an opening or something. But yeah, I don't even think with Gavin Newsom that you have a space for somebody on the kind of center right or center like a Manchin.
No, yeah, I agree with that completely. I think, Newsom has sold himself in California. Interestingly, I don't think he flies outside of California. I do think he's charismatic, but I think outside of California, he just gets absolutely torched, even in a Democratic primary. But he certainly would be able to have a lot of money, and he would be able to get a lot of media. So it's not an insane idea that Gavin Newsom could position himself in a primary. I think the entire no label shtick, I'm sure we agree on this, is just so cynical. It's weaponizing this American fatigue with the political system in a way that just advantages the political system. It's all about exploiting Americans' exhaustion with corruption for the sake of strengthening the ability to stay corrupt, to like fortify the corrupt system. And you can see that by the people who flock to no labels. In fact, like that's the most obvious thing in the world. It's just low taxes and open borders. Like it's on the center left and the center right. You bring both of them together, and it's the worst of both worlds. And I think the one thing that populists have in common with centrists is like, why can't we just compromise? Why can't we just sit down at the table and do something for people? The problem is that centrists aren't actually serious. What they want is to sit down at the table and do something that benefits them. Right. Their version of compromise is let's help the industry. Or let's help the political class, and they do it under the veil, which is really powerful, of compromise. But typically, when people start talking about compromise in Washington, D.C., you should get really nervous.
Right. Yeah. Everybody loves the idea of compromise. It's good. That's what we learned in kindergarten.
They should be doing stuff.
But exactly, they're exploiting that. So Daniel Boguslaw for The Intercept went up to cover this event in New Hampshire. If we could put up this last element.
So good.
A No Labels board member told Boguslaw that if Martin Luther King were around today, he'd be supporting a Manchin centrist run. He would be basically a member of No Labels. He wrote, the board member said, Dr. King was a centrist. If he were alive today, he would be a member of the No Labels party. Boguslaw then pointed out to him, hey, don't you remember that whole thing where he said the biggest obstacle to progress is white moderates? Mm-hmm. And the board member was kind of shunted away before he could answer that question. But
this board member in particular was like an associate of Martin Luther King's, was he not? Yeah. Like someone who was in the circle of Martin Luther King.
Mm-hmm. Right, and we also had that AI image going around of Donald Trump and Martin Luther King on Twitter. Did you see that yesterday?
No,
you can't unsee
but I can
it.
Picture it.
You can go find that on social media if you want. It's MLK and Trump at a diner.
At a diner.
Yeah, sitting in a like an Ohio diner kind of thing, just enjoying each other's company. And ironically, No Labels gave Donald Trump an award in 2016 as a problem solver. A guy so now they're running against him as too far right. In 2016, they were like elevated him as somebody they would support. So I guess Martin Luther King too, board member. That's why he's at the diner with Trump. Also a No Labels member.
They were just getting some stuff done.
So I wonder what Martin Luther King thinks about No Labels going after their former guy.
That would be interesting.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.